Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello, this is episode 46. Sometimes my interviews for this podcast are very much just like a casual chat. And this interview with Sabine Purkhauser was just like this. Sabine is a person with many different creative interests, including lino cuts, sewing, vintage fashion, and especially houseplants and art. She posts on Instagram under the name Houseplant Sketchbook. I enjoyed this conversation so much and had a big smile on my face at the end. We laughed a lot and Sabine is funny and gentle and I can't wait to introduce you to her. Let's listen. Thank you so much for being here with me. I'm really looking forward to chatting.
It's a pleasure. I'm really honored that you decided to invite me as a guest, since quite a few people you already have there are amazing. I'm just painting my plants. What did I do to be invited?
Well, you're very inspiring, so we met on Instagram, and you post on Instagram under the name Houseplant Sketchbook, and houseplants are a big deal for you, right? Let's talk about your houseplants. How you started with this passion for houseplants and how it developed.
Yeah, I would say the first few houseplants were a gift from my mom. She was like, it's a flat, your first own flat, you need something green, and she bought me some classics like the Dracaena or the spider plant, I think a golden pothos, and I just had them and I kind of ignored them, but they somehow survived. And yeah, I also had a lot of pets when I grew up in Austria, and I missed them a lot. And so I had gerbils and hamsters, and one day they all died. And I was like, okay, what's next? New pet or something else? And it was like maybe some birds or something else. And then I was like, okay, let's go for plants. And then I bought my first few plants. And yeah, then it kind of exploded. And I don't count them, but I assume I'm over 200.
Wow.
Yes, so lots of plants, a lot of greenery.
Are they all in your flat right now?
They are all in my flat, and a few are at my workplace because I don't have enough space anymore.
Oh, wow. So every surface. Do you have hanging plants as well, or just on the surface?
Yes, I have hanging plants at my sky windows, and at my workplace I have hanging plants, and most of them is underground and in shelves everywhere.
I love it. And is your mum a houseplant collector as well? Because it seems like it's something you share with her.
Yeah, she's a collector too. She was kind of part of the first houseplant hype in the 80s or 70s, more in the 80s. So she has her own houseplants, and since she has them quite a long time, hers are really huge, like big monstera, 60 centimeter leaves with a lot of holes and everything huge cacti, huge monstera, huge Dracaena, huge everything. And I'm just starting out, and my plants are just small and hopefully get big too.
And you actually inspired me. Your page just made me feel so excited about houseplants, and I have started too. And I know houseplants are a big thing at the moment since lockdown, I don't know, but a lot of people seem to be getting into houseplants, and you inspired me. But I'd love to talk about that. Like, what do you think this new wave is all about of everyone obsessively buying houseplants?
Yeah, I think it's really mostly because of lockdown. People are at home, and not everyone has place, time and money to have a pet, but you want something to care for, and you want it to have it nice at home, so people tend to go for plants. And yeah, the market exploded, the prices skyrocketed, and yeah, it's a really big hype. It's not the best for the nature because yeah, it's kind of like grown far away, transported around, and so it's not the best for nature. But yeah, people love plants, and what also is really nice with plants, you can prop them, you can chop them up, you can swap them, and you can share. That's very nice about them.
That's an interesting thing. I had never thought about that, but you're right. You know, a big business is big business, whether it's
yes,
plants
most
or
of
not.
them are grown far away. I think a few of them are grown in Africa because it's hot and sunny, or quite a lot of them are coming from Asia. So I think Thailand and Indonesia are big growers, and they are then usually in Europe. They're transported to the Netherlands, imported, climated, and then shipped through Europe to the plant store. So most of the plants have the plant passport Netherlands, but they are like from somewhere else in the world.
I'm going to look into that and see if there's a movement for ecological houseplant cultivation, or there must be some sort of movement like that, moving away from that.
Not really. Most of them are just grown like the flowers that are cut for the flower stores. It's kind of like similar, kind of like bad for the environment. I'm like, yeah.
Maybe the way to go is what you said, like swapping with others and
swapping
cuttings
and propagating. But sometimes people are like, yeah, this is the Monstera aurum. It's yellow and it's awesome and it's extremely expensive. It's like some of them they go like for $100 per leaf or more, and then you're like, wow, that's expensive, and people they buy it. I'm always like, you know what, the plant can die or you can get a pest. So I'm like, I have a limit and I don't go over it because it's a lot of money. I mean, yeah.
It's interesting, this thing inside humans, this need to care for something, and we can care for each other and we can care for pets, but there is this definite need inside us to care for something, isn't there?
Yes, it is.
I remember when I was living in London, and it was very, very much an urban jungle. I was living right in the centre of London, and I just remember getting loads and loads of plants and just needing something to care for in amongst the city, the big busy city.
Yes, especially in the city, we are kind of like grey, no nature. So we try to put nature inside our houses to make it green and to make our own urban jungle, as the name for the community is the urban jungle community, and plant friends.
And once I started collecting houseplants, I don't really understand how I lived without them, in that my house, when I put them outside recently to soak up some of the rain, and the house looked so bare without them. I don't know how I had a home without houseplants before. Yes. I'm sure you would feel the same if you took your 200 plants away.
Yeah, it would be very empty and quite a lot of space. I rearranged the furniture in my living room, and I had to move everything out because I was getting new windows, and it was like, whoa, that's empty. It's so much space. I was like, I kind of like it, but it's so naked. I need to put them back.
Yes. And what are you going to do when you run out of space? You'll have to, or do they do that one replace the other? There must be a limit, but have you reached it yet?
Yes, there's kind of like a space limit, and sometimes when I have too much plants, I give them. I'm going into the Facebook group for plant swaps. I'm like, yeah, I have a few plants. Who wants them for free? I don't have space anymore. Sometimes you kind of fell out of love with a plant, or like, you buy it, you have it, and then you're like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe someone else enjoys it more. And that happens. Same for props. I'm propagating mostly my begonias and peperomias, and there's not much space left. But I try to keep it kind of like at a good size.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I have a pest invasion, I'm like, I have too many plants. I need to get rid of plants. I don't want that much. I want only 100, and then I'm like giving away plants, and then it's kind of empty spot, and a month later I'm like, there's space for a new plant. It's a bit of addiction to where you're like trying to keep it balanced, but you're like, yes, more, and at the same time like, no.
And how do you choose the next plant? Do you just feel it? Do you just fall in love, as you say?
Yes, it's kind of like I love some types of plants that I prefer because I like the way to care for them or just the way they look. Some of them are very easy. You can kind of forget them. And others are like, oh, you're so pretty. I like you. I mean, it's not the best way to buy plants. Usually, or it's best when you say like, okay, that's my condition. You have kind of like a lot of sun. It's very hot and humid. So you best get something that likes it and not like I have this plant and now I need to change everything around to make it happy.
Yes, that's good advice. And I was looking at your Instagram page and I noticed you have a whole range of different textures, colors and sizes, and I wondered if that was deliberate. You know, you have ones with spots and stripes and spirals, and I wonder if this very diverse range of plants was deliberate or it just happened that way.
It just happened, but the more funky looking plants are the begonias that are the most colorful, and there are tons of different textures and patterns. But I also enjoy when it's just a lush big green plant, so I'm trying to go for plants I like.
Do you have favorites?
Yes. The plants that grow new leaves and doesn't have pests.
Yeah. And tell me about how you began sketching and documenting your plants in a nature journal.
Well, it started in January when I was looking for how to draw birds. And then, surprisingly, I found the website of John Mueller. And then he was like, there is nature channel. And it was like, oh, I like this a lot. I want to do this. And it was kind of like in mid of winter, so outside it was snowing, wet and cold. So I was like, okay, outside isn't really happening right now. And I also found your podcast and was listening to it. And then I decided, okay, I'm gonna start with painting my houseplants, trying to recreate them. And yeah, the first few weren't that pretty. I was kind of like getting back into drawing and sketching, especially with watercolor, since I didn't use it for about 10 years. And it was like, oh my god, that's difficult. How did you do it 10 years ago?
Wow. And tell me about that. Tell me about your creative journey up until now. So you said you were using watercolor in the past. Tell me about that.
Yes, I was always drawing and sketching since I was a child. I think I started like a lot of girls with horses and later moved on to historical clothing. I copied a lot of historical clothing from pictures and books. My mom is an artist too, so she has a lot of interests and stuff, so I'm kind of like getting stuff from her side. Same for my dad, he's an artist too.
Oh, wow.
And I was, a lot of drawing at home, and so it was clear that my future would be in some kind of creative area. And we visited a school for engraving, and I loved it. And then I visited a school in Upper Austria for engraving. And it was 4 years, and we not only learned engraving, but also drawing and designing and everything that's included to be a good engraver. And I then moved to Switzerland because of my job. And I didn't paint or draw at home at all because I'm doing it 5 days a week at work. So it's kind of like already happening. So whenever I read somewhere, you should paint or sketch 5 minutes a day, and I'm like, not doing it. And then I'm like, well, I do it at work. It's my job. So I'm now working in Switzerland as an engraver, and I'm designing coins and medals and stuff for Swiss Carnival and international customers. So maybe one day you find somewhere a coin designed by me. So we don't make money to pay with, we do collector's editions. So stuff you buy and keep and look at it.
That's fantastic. That's such an unusual job. I've never met an engraver before.
Yeah.
I love meeting people with unusual jobs.
Yeah, engravers aren't common. So in my class in school, there were about, I think we started with 9 people in the class of engravers and ended with 5. So it's not kind of like an everyday job.
And so now you are using watercolor. Tell me about the media that you use when you're painting or drawing your houseplants.
Usually I start with sketching with the pencil. I love sketching with the pencil, even though a lot of people are like, oh, sketching and a pencil, how terrible. It's every time when you're kind of like talking with an artist and they're like, oh no, I hate sketching, I hate drawing, and I'm like, why?
Really? That's an interesting perspective.
Yes. Well, I love sketching and drawing with the pencil, and when I'm working with watercolor, I'm trying to capture the shape of the plant with a pencil, sketch outline, and then I just go for watercolor and use color, I think, that are the colors that are suited for painting, and I just go for it. I don't really think about it too much.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And do you feel like painting a particular individual plant makes you love it more? Deepens your connection with that plant?
Yes, especially with plants I have, but I don't care that much about. So, for example, I remember the strawberry begonia. I just had it, but it was like, okay, I have it. And then I decided to sketch it, and it took me about a week till I I had time to paint it, and I sketched it in the time about 4 times, because the plant was growing and moving that much that it was like every second day it was in a different position, and I had to try to capture it anew because I wanted to paint it as it was right now and not 5 days ago. And I was like watching the plant grow, and it's a fast growing plant, and usually even if the plants are growing all the time, you don't really realize it. You're just like, okay, now it's kind of bigger like a month ago, but usually you don't compare it day to day, or you don't see it because they're a bit too slow to really be visible, their growth.
Yeah. Would you have any tips for someone who was painting a growing subject?
Well, go for an easy plant.
Yeah.
And I think also accept that the plant, when it grows, changes and might look different than your finished drawing, and just enjoy the process.
Yeah, with art and with plants, with living things, there's very much a level of a feeling that you just have to go with it and see. I mean, watercolor is like that, isn't it? Watercolor has its own life. As soon as you put wet paint into water, it has its own way, and you just have to go and see what happens, right?
Yes. I mean, you could start with an easy plant like a Santiviera. They don't move, really. They are slow growers. They're like steady, and not always are the plants fast growing. The one Saxifraga I was painting moved a lot because I changed the position it was standing. It was at the beginning I have it in a east-facing window, and then I moved it to a south-facing area where I paint, and so the leaves were changing towards the light, like, oh, it's coming from a different direction. They were like moving around to get enough light, and so the plant definitely moved more than it would have moved normally.
Yes. I have had this happen before when painting doing a really detailed study of something that was growing, and I did have to just change the composition into whatever was possible, fudge it a little bit so that you could make a finished composition with something that didn't exist anymore because it's changed.
Yes, I also think sometimes you just have to kind of make the painting look like the plant, even if it's not exactly the plant.
Yes.
If it's capturing the plant with all the stuff that makes it a plant, that's fine, even if the leaves are in a different position. But as long as it's the plant, it's the plant.
Yes, yes. So you live in Switzerland. Tell me what nature looks like where you are.
Very green. So it's kind of like in the fairy tales of the Grimm brothers. So wooden areas with a mix of different trees. They are kind of like cool and dark. And then you go outside onto the grassy areas where the sun is shining. And a lot of lakes. It's really tons of lakes, like lakes everywhere. And a lot of mountains. So when you are traveling around with the train in Switzerland, you are always seeing something like a mountain or a lake. It's like lake, mountain, lake, mountain, and of course a lot of buildings. Switzerland isn't that big, so there are buildings and houses everywhere, and in between there is nature.
And at home in Austria, is it similar?
It's similar. It's just a bit more flat in the area I grew up. So in Switzerland, I'm living close to the Swiss Alps, so I can see the mountains from my balcony. And in Austria, where I grew up, it was more like the rolling hills with a lot of farmers and small wooden areas and small rivers and small lakes. And also very green and lush.
Did you have a lot of nature in your childhood?
Yes, I grew up in the country and a small village, and it was an old farmhouse with a lot of green around. So as soon as I went out of the building, on one side was another building, but in between there was all the green. So it was like a lot of animals, a lot of nature.
Do you feel like a child exposed to nature grows into an adult who loves nature? Do you think that, I'm always talking about this connection and I'm interested to know your opinion on that. Do you think nature exposure in childhood cements an adult who loves nature?
I think the connection is different, but I don't think everyone who sees and grows up with nature in a childhood is connected to nature as grown up. Myself, when I moved to Switzerland, I moved to kind of like the outskirts of a city, and I was really deconnected to nature. I was classically plant blind, and there was nature around, but I didn't really care about it. It was just happening, and it was like, okay, nice. So I think you have to work to stay connected with nature, but since I was growing up in a village with a lot of farms and they were growing animals to eat, my understanding and connection to kind of like food industry, wouldn't call it food industry because they were all small farmers. They weren't like, the smallest one was with 3 cows and the biggest one was with 20 cows, so it's small size. And we also had goats and rabbits, and when they breed we had to kill them to eat them. And so I'm kind of like more like it's the way it happens if you want to eat them.
Yes. Interesting. And I'm wondering about your knowledge of houseplants, because you obviously know a lot about species and how to care for them, and I'm wondering if that just came through by doing it as you started to grow your houseplant family.
Yes, it definitely developed through caring for them. And also sometimes when I'm like not knowing what I'm doing, I'm often calling my mom because mom knows everything. I'm like, Mom, I have a problem. help me. It's the same when I'm painting outside and I have a picture of a plant and I'm like, I don't know it. I'm gonna call my mom. She knows it for sure.
That's so good to have a mum who's a plant lover and an artist at the same time.
Yes, I'm like, here, copy, kind of.
You said that you were going to start a perpetual journal.
Yes, I saw quite a few perpetual journals and I was like, oh, I like it. And I'm gonna to visit my parents in a few weeks, and my mom is an artist and she has a lot of books about art and stuff around art because she's just like me, interested in a lot of different things. So her book collection is huge. And we hopefully gonna sketch a lot of together. So early in the morning we want to go outside and sketch, and also to bind a perpetual journal. So
Have
we
you
have
done
to...
bookbinding before?
No, I didn't. But I hope my mom has some experience, or she at least has some books with everything that needs to be entered. But I think she made a book before for my sister.
Mm-hmm.
From when they were somewhere on holiday, she made a book with stuff from the holiday. So we're gonna bind a book together, and I'm starting a perpetual journal. And I hope you don't mind, I wanted to mention she is boss of a gallery in Upper Austria, and she wants to make regular nature journaling meetups.
In Austria, fantastic.
Yes, in Upper Austria. I can send you the details.
Absolutely. So your mum does nature journaling as well?
Not really nature journaling. She's coming more from the kind of like artist side, more like nature studies. So sitting outside with a beautiful view and capturing the landscape. So it's more like big scale nature journaling and less the in detail small stuff.
Mm-hmm. And does she use watercolor as well?
Not that much. She has watercolor, but she is more using pencil and pastel and gouache. So all the stuff I'm not that much using. She's kind of like more the big scale gouache painter and with the pastels, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I don't know.
Some new media can be intimidating. I find myself sticking to what I know very often, and it is fun to branch out, but it can be a little scary.
Yes, I tried gouache and I was like, I don't like it.
And I'm wondering about the way your process, like capturing your plants, has changed over time. Did you come to your style straight away, or has your style of capturing the plants through your art developed over time?
Well, since I only paint my plants in about half a year, there isn't that much of a change of style. It's more like developing my technique. So from kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing to looks like I want it to look, but just recently I use colored paper and black and white pencil, colored pencil. Again, I used to use this technique in school, and I used it again, and it was like, oh, I like it. I'm gonna use it again. That's awesome.
That's fun. And I wonder if you have to get tricky with different techniques to capture the different textures and colors and spots and stripes and spirals in the unique plants that you have. Do you use masking fluid and other tricks to capture all those? How do you go about that?
Well, I try to stay clear of masking fluid, but I just used it recently and I'm not the biggest fan, so
okay.
I try to not use it. I'm trying to just layer it till I reach the way it looks like, except for when I'm using kind of glitter watercolor. Then I'm just going on top because it's kind of like opaque enough to use it on top of everything.
Tell me about that. Glitter watercolor, when do you use it?
when I'm painting glittery plants like begonias, and some of the plants, they have kind of like a silvery, glittery sheen, especially when they're colored, and then I using it at the end and add it on top of the color, and usually the next few plants I paint afterwards have some glitter too, because glitter spreads, so you just have it on the palette and the brushes. Even if you clean everything, there is a hint of glitter.
Wow, and where do you find glittery watercolor, for those who might be interested?
I just bought it online.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a brand, a favorite brand?
I have the glitter plant from Van Gogh and from Fintech. They paint both equally good, so I would say just go for it. I'm not like, oh, that's the best.
Yeah. The only time I've used glittery paint is I was painting a blue ringed octopus, and I don't know if you know this animal, but when it's feeling threatened, it has these incredible rings that come up in just this iridescent blue. And I found this Daniel Smith paint called Iridescent Electric Blue, and it's got these flecks of glitter in it, and it was just perfect for this sparkly octopus.
Yeah, octopus are awesome.
And I'm wondering what you've been painting lately in your journal. What things have you been investigating lately?
The last things I painted was ducks.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to capture ducks. I went to an urban sketching meeting, and I was like, let's try it. And then I made a small part of a building and like 10 ducks. Because I was like,
because you're a nature girl.
Yes, I was like, no, I'm gonna go for the ducks. And it was a real challenge to capture them, because the one that was sleeping, that was kind of easy. And then the people were like, oh, there are ducks. And you were like, don't move too close. And they were like going closer and closer. And you were like, I need to sketch the duck before they're gonna go away. And then they were close. The ducks was like, nah, I'm gone. Bye. So, yeah. And yes, and then I made some strawberries and mushrooms, because they were growing on the foot of a big tree, and it was just kind of like fairy tale looking with all the small mushrooms cluttered together and the strawberries. It was very cute.
And I wonder if there's something that you have in mind to paint that's a challenge. You know, there's several things that I have thought, oh, it would be great to paint that, but it's too big a challenge. Do you have anything that you look at and think, I can't do it, or are you just someone to dive in and just tackle whatever comes to mind?
Probably bigger plants. If a lot of leaves and flowers, I usually tend to go for one leaf or a few flowers and leaves. So I'm like, full plant with everything is like, no. Maybe a part of it is enough.
And tell me about the connection that you can find online, because I'm fascinated by this amazing thing that's happening at the moment where we are just finding this incredible connection. And I think through the pandemic, and everyone's been online and focused on finding new ways to keep busy and new ways to keep the spirits lifted. And I know I have found amazing connections through the computer, and I think that you have found that finding your community through online connections as well. I'd love to know about that, how finding online connections in nature and art.
Yes, I would say a part of the connections are made through Instagram, through the plant community, mostly in Switzerland. At least I try to connect with Switzerland people first, because I'm like, maybe we can meet up one day, and also with just people around the world who just love plants too. And you're like, what a nice plant, and you're like, yes, and your plants are awesome too. It's kind of like, yeah, it's
you've got
just
that something in common.
That's connecting, and the same goes for Twitch. So I found Liz through you, and I was just watching her at Twitch, and usually they're the same people hanging out, and you kind of get to know them and looking forward to see them again. And yeah, you're kind of like, they're getting part of the life, and you're like, they are friends too.
Yeah, so explain about Twitch for those who don't know it as a platform.
Twitch is kind of similar like YouTube, but it's focused on live streaming. So there are people doing everything from gaming to cooking to just music to art. And I found the first artist I watched and found was Liz Clayton Fuller, who was on your podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just watch them doing the art live, and there's also chat so you can interact with the artist. And it's really nice because it's not like on other platforms just watching something that's finished and edited to whatever they want to show you, to live happening. And that's really nice because you're kind of together as the people who watch the artist and the artist who get watched by the people.
Yeah, I feel like there was something in what you just said, in that there's a realness and authenticity to it, because on social media we put our best pictures, we put our best presentation of ourselves, but when you're doing something raw with someone, they make mistake and they're just chatting about their process, and that's something more real to it, right?
Yes, there's no kind of like pretense. It's just what is happening right now. And even if the neighbor's dog barks like crazy and you can't hear anything else that's happening, same for when the artist makes something and you're like, okay, I don't like it, it's too dark, or I spilled water. It's happening, and it's not later edited to, oh, there was a mistake. It's fun.
Yes. And I think that people are craving that now. More authenticity, more realness in the things that they consume. And so you've been doing Twitch live streams as well. You've been the artist with people watching you and chatting to you. How did that feel? How did you come to that?
It's kind of strange, but also kind of like you just do it.
Does it change the way you work, or is it just the same with the extra element of chatting with some friends?
I would say the focus is less. So when I'm trying to paint something complicated, I'm not going live on Twitch because I need to focus on myself. So I'm going for kind of easy to paint stuff, and because you try to paint and keep up with the chat when there's chat happening. Sometimes you're painting alone and you're talking to yourself like the crazy cat girl. You're like, and I'm doing this, and then like, oh no, this happened, and maybe someone is watching or not. So as long as the people aren't in the chat, I don't know, and I'm like,
you just keep chatting.
Yes.
I wonder if it develops a habit that when you're painting alone, not on Twitch, you just keep commentating your own work.
Well, I'm not commenting what I'm doing when I paint, but I'm an introvert. I'm a lot of time alone, so I'm kind of like sometimes just talking to myself when I'm doing something and it isn't working out. I'm like, no, it's happened the wrong way.
I love the internet in that it gives a place for introverts to present ourselves. I would say I'm definitely an introvert as well, and there's a place for us.
Yes, you can connect with people without being in a big group of people and being overwhelmed, or just standing on the outskirts and being like, it's nice that you know each other forever. I don't know you forever, so I can't say anything, and maybe I'm looking a bit bored and I want to go home.
Yeah, we can find our people, I think. Yes. It's great. I think there's been a lot of tragedy and a lot of difficulty, and this time has been very strange. And at the same time, the connections we've been making all across the world have been really beautiful and really precious, I feel.
Yeah, even through all the terrible stuff that is happening, surprisingly, my mood was awesome. Like the first lockdown, I was like, I don't care, I like it. I don't need to meet people. I can stay at home. And because I was starting later at work because there wasn't enough to do, I was going by foot to work because it's about half an hour and it was early in the morning. And for the first time in my life, I saw fox puppies playing, and it was like, oh my god, there are fox puppies. I first thought it was kind of like some cats or dogs, and then it was like, no, it's foxes. Fox mama with her babies. And
do you think you saw them because there was less activity to disturb them?
No, it was on a grassy area. I forgot the word. On a meadow.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like under the bridge, kind of like between wooden areas. The wooden area right next to me is renaturated. So they don't change anything except you have to remove trees because it's kind of like crashing down on the walking area. So they try to rehab it to natural nature.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a small river and a meadow and more trees and bushes, and on the lawn there were the fox playing in the sun, and it was so cute. And I was just walking to work and watching nature and hearing the frogs in a pond and the crows and the birds and some cats who wanted to be petted on the belly.
Now tell me, I've noticed when looking through your Instagram feed that you have houseplants, you have pictures of houseplants, and you also have cat portraits. Tell me about cat portraits.
Yes. The cats are all cat portraits from friends of the internet who have cats and plants. I'm kind of like plants without cat. So a lot of people who own houseplants own also 1 or 2 cats. So it's kind of like
I was wondering about that, if they were correlated.
Yes, it's
cat
kind
loving
of like
and plant loving.
People and cats and plants. It's kind of like goes together, and it's really very common that people have both. It's like you have both. That's it. And
you're very interested in caring for things, yeah.
Yeah.
And so you're the official cat portrait person, are you?
No, it was for my own pleasure in last autumn that I made some cat sketches. I don't even know why I did it. I just started sketching, and yeah, till Christmas, and then I was like, okay, there was a different challenge from a textile artist. I wanted to participate. She was calling for a year of miniatures, so there were a theme for every week, and I think the first week was wings, and it was like, okay, wings are part of the bird. I'm gonna make birds, and then I made birds, and then I googled for how to sketch bird, and so everything kind of started the way it is and happened.
I love it. It's so great to talk to you. Tell me the best place for people to find you online. Is Instagram the best place?
Yes, Instagram, Houseplant Sketchbook is my Instagram page. I mean, I could mention that I'm sewing and have a sewing blog, but it's not connected to nature.
Okay. Yeah, say what it is.
Yeah, with my sister and mom, we have a sewing blog, and we post about our sewing, but it's only in German, so I'm not gonna go more into it.
What sort of things do you like to sew?
I started off with vintage clothing, so I bought a lot of sewing magazines from the 50s and 60s and 70s to sew dresses with the cinched waist and the white skirts, and I love dressing up.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm more like jeans, t-shirt, that's enough. And then I made a lot of dirndls as they are traditional in Austria. And right now I'm between kind of like more modern or more vintage. So I'm like switching around between what I'm the mood for to sew and to wear.
Fantastic. I'll definitely put the links to your sewing blog in the show notes, because there are many listeners from German-speaking places, so that'd be great. And if someone wants to join you on Twitch, how can they do that?
I have the link of Twitch in my Instagram account, okay. And I usually stream on Saturday and Sunday. Saturday is in the morning, 10 in the morning in Berlin time, and in the afternoon on Sunday. So, but if you head over to Twitch, there's kind of like the timeline and you see when I go live.
Okay, thank you so much. It's been so fun talking with you. I've got a big smile on my face.
That's good.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Sabine. She's such a delight and I really enjoyed chatting with her. Sabine also opened my eyes to something that I hadn't thought a lot about before, which is that the big commercial houseplant industry is actually not that great for the earth. We have this sense that we're bringing nature inside our homes, but I felt a little embarrassed that I hadn't considered this before. But of course, houseplants are big business, and wherever there's big business, there are major issues for sustainability. Everything from shipping plants across the world, using tons of plastic, to using peat moss in the soil mixes. Peat comes from bogs that are rare and fragile ecosystems. To other things like plant poaching, it's an absolute minefield. In the show notes for this episode, Sabine shared some articles where you can read about the darker side of the houseplant industry and also find ways you can make choices which make keeping houseplants more sustainable. After this conversation, I'm really feeling motivated to look into groups where I can learn about propagating plants at home and swapping houseplants with others as a way of bypassing the big business side of all this. So follow the links in the show notes for this episode to find Sabine on Instagram and Twitch. She's very inspiring. If you're enjoying this podcast and you'd like to show your support, you can do that by giving it a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. This helps the podcast be found by more people who love nature and art and all the fun things that we talk about here. You can also support the podcast on Patreon for as little as $1 a month, which makes the project sustainable and is really appreciated. Go to patreon.com/journalingwithnature to learn more about that. And a huge thank you to the people already supporting the podcast through Patreon. It makes a huge difference. So take care, be well. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week.